A biker gang rolls into a peaceful farmer's market, targeting a 72-year-old Vietnam veteran selling vegetables from his modest stand. The leather-clad thugs knock over his tomatoes and force the decorated soldier to his knees, making him crawl through the dirt to pick up every scattered piece while they grind his American flag into the mud. The crowd watches in horror as 12 criminals humiliate a man who served his country with honor. But the quiet Asian tourist observing from nearby isn't just another shocked bystander. This is Jackie Chan himself, researching small-town America. For his next film, the gang leader has no idea he just degraded a veteran in front of a martial arts master who spent decades perfecting the art of destroying bullies without breaking a sweat. While the bikers laugh at their elderly victim, the legendary action star steps forward with that deceptively calm smile that has terrified movie villains for 50 years. The veteran looks up through tears of rage, recognizing the man who's about to turn 12 armed criminals into a pile of zip-tied regret. What happens when you humiliate a war hero in front of Hollywood's greatest fighter? Can a dozen bikers survive 30 seconds against a legend who makes the impossible look effortless? What happened next would haunt the gang leader's nightmares for the rest of his pathetic existence. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke over Millbrook like a promise kept, painting the Iowa farmland in shades of gold that spoke to 72 years of Frank Kowalski's memories. The weathered veteran loaded his pickup truck with the same methodical precision he'd brought to every morning since returning from Vietnam. Wooden crates of tomatoes arranged just so, cucumbers nestled in neat rows, peppers sorted by size and ripeness. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency despite the arthritis that reminded him daily of time's passage. Each vegetable had been grown on the small plot behind his modest house, tended with the same discipline that had once kept his squad alive in the jungles of Southeast Asia. A small American flag, faded but spotlessly clean, fluttered from his truck's antenna, a symbol he'd earned the right to display through 3 tours of duty and scars that still ached when storms approached. The drive through Millbrook's quiet streets felt like a meditation. Past the Methodist church where he'd married Sarah 45 years ago, past the cemetery where she now rested beneath a simple granite stone, past houses where neighbors still waved from their porches despite the early hour. This was the America he'd fought for, not the politicians or the rhetoric, but the simple dignity of people who worked hard, helped their neighbors, and understood the difference between right and wrong. The town square. Other vendors were already setting up for the weekly farmers market. Martha Brennan, 58, with graying brown hair kept in a practical style, arranged her homemade pies with the pride of someone who'd learned her grandmother's recipes by heart. Pete Morrison, built like the oak he carved into kitchen utensils, tested the stability of his display table with careful attention. Louise Kelly, the newest addition to their community, organized mason jars of honey with the nervous energy of someone still learning market rhythms. Frank positioned his 8x8 stand with military precision, every hand-painted price sign perfectly aligned, his metal cash box, genuine surplus from 1975, centered and ready for the day's honest commerce. The vegetables spoke for themselves. Honest work, fair prices, no shortcuts or deception. When Dorothy Walsh shuffled over for her weekly tomatoes, moving carefully with her aluminum walker, Frank helped her select the ripest ones and made exact change with bills worn soft from years of handling. My granddaughter's visiting from the city, Dorothy mentioned, counting out quarters with shaking hands. Works for some news station. Always said she'd come back when she had time. Hope she enjoys the small-town pace, Frank replied, meaning every word. By 8 a.m. The market hummed with gentle commerce. Neighbors buying from neighbors, children learning patience while their parents selected produce, teenagers earning spending money by helping elderly customers carry their purchases. Frank surveyed the scene with quiet satisfaction, knowing this was what he'd defended overseas. The thunder started as a distant rumble on Highway 34, building to a mechanical roar that sliced through the morning peace like a blade through silk. 12 Harley-Davidson motorcycles approached Millbrook in tight formation, their chrome gleaming despite road dust kicked up by aggressive riding. At the front rode Tommy Blade Richards, 35 years of criminal violence condensed into leather and menace. The jagged scar running from his left ear to his jaw caught sunlight as he surveyed the approaching town through dead, calculating eyes. Behind him, his iron wolves followed in precise formation. Bobby Crane with gold teeth and a spider tattoo crawling up his neck. Hammer Williams, whose massive frame dwarfed his bike. Psycho Pete Murphy, whose nervous tics betrayed a mind damaged by violence and methamphetamine. Each man wore club colors like armor, their leather vests displaying patches that told stories of mayhem across 3 states. If they'd ridden hard from their base near Cedar Rapids, following orders from Vincent Viper Castellano himself. Millbrook represented opportunity, small enough to terrorize completely, isolated enough that law enforcement response would be delayed, prosperous enough to provide steady income through protection rackets. The farmers' market would serve as their introduction, a demonstration of power that would establish new reality for the community. Blade raised his right hand as they crested the hill overlooking peaceful streets. The signal brought 11 engines to synchronized idle, the sudden quiet more ominous than their roar had been. Below them, the town square bustled with Saturday morning commerce, families and elderly couples moving between vendor stalls with the unhurried pace of people who felt safe in their own community. Remember, Blade's voice carried authority earned through years of violence. We're not here to rob today. We're here to educate. These people need to understand how things work now, and education requires memorable lessons. Bobby Crane grinned, revealing teeth capped in gold that gleamed like tiny suns. Think they'll learn quick, boss? They always do, Blade replied, his scarred face showing nothing beyond cold calculation. Fear is universal language, and we're about to become fluent teachers. The formation descended toward Main Street like a mechanical avalanche, engines revving in calculated intimidation. Blade chose parking positions with tactical precision, directly in front of the farmers' market, across multiple handicapped spaces, blocking wheelchair access and emergency vehicle routes. Each bike positioned to create maximum disruption while providing quick escape routes if needed. As they dismounted, the transformation from traveling criminals to occupying force became complete. Chains rattled, leather creaked, exhaust mixed with unwashed bodies and stale beer. Parents instinctively pulled children closer. Elderly customers clutched purses tighter. Vendors began calculating whether they could pack up quickly enough to escape whatever approached. Blade surveyed the market like a predator selecting prey, his eyes lingering on vulnerable elderly vendors and obvious prosperity displayed in quality produce and handmade crafts. Among the Saturday morning shoppers moved a figure so naturally invisible that even observant vendors barely registered his presence. Jackie Chan, 71 but carrying himself with fluid grace that defied age, wore clothes so unremarkable they served as perfect camouflage. Khaki pants, simple button-down shirt, comfortable walking shoes that made no sound on pavement. In his hands, a small leather notebook recorded observations about authentic American community life. He'd come to Millbrook following months of research into rural farming communities, preparing for a film project requiring deep understanding of rhythms and relationships that defined small-town America. His notes captured details escaping casual observation. How Martha Brennan arranged pies to catch morning light. The way Pete Morrison tested each wooden bowl for perfect pitch before displaying it. The military precision with which Frank Kowalski organized vegetables into neat formations. Jackie approached each vendor with genuine curiosity, his accented English polite and respectful as he inquired about growing techniques, crafting methods, family recipes passed down through generations. His questions revealed someone understanding that true culture lived in details. The way people's hands moved when they worked, pride taken in honest labor, gentle humor seasoning interactions with neighbors. At Pete Morrison's woodworking stand, Jackie examined a hand-carved American eagle with eyes appreciating true artistry. The wood grain follows the wing pattern, he observed, running careful fingers along the sculpture. How long did this take? Pete beamed with pleasure of recognized skill. About 40 hours, spread over 2 weeks. Oak from a tree that came down in last spring's storm. Seemed wrong to waste something that stood for a century. Jackie purchased the eagle without haggling. Understanding the price reflected not just time and material, but preservation of traditions machines couldn't replicate. His notebook recorded not just the transaction, but philosophy behind it. American belief that worthy things deserved worthy effort. Frank Kowalski's stand drew attention through sheer quality of produce and the veteran's dignified bearing. Something familiar lived in the older man's posture, economical movements speaking to discipline learned under pressure. Jackie selected tomatoes with care of someone who'd grown up appreciating food, engaging Frank in conversation about soil composition and growing seasons. "These are beautiful," Jackie said, meaning it. The tomatoes showed deep red color and firm texture coming only from patient cultivation. "You must have excellent soil." "More about attention than soil," Frank replied, weathered face creasing. In slight smile. "Plants tell you what they need if you know how to listen." As Jackie counted bills for his purchase, distant rumble of motorcycle engines began intruding on the market's peaceful atmosphere. Both men turned toward the sound, Frank's expression hardening with recognition while Jackie's eyes narrowed with professional assessment. The notebook remained open, but attention shifted from cultural observation to tactical evaluation. The approaching thunder suggested his quiet research morning was about to become something entirely different. The iron wolves spread through the farmer's market like poison through clean water, their presence immediately transforming wholesome atmosphere into something dark and predatory. Blade took point while his gang deployed with practiced coordination, each man targeting specific vendors and patterns speaking to systematic criminal methodology rather than random violence. Bobby Crane's approach to Pete Morrison's woodworking display appeared accidental until his elbow caught the table edge, sending hand-carved animals scattering across pavement. "Oh, sorry about that," he said with mock concern, gold teeth glinting. "Guess I'm just clumsy around pretty things." Heavy boots ground a delicate wooden bird into splinters as he made no effort avoiding fallen merchandise. Hammer Williams positioned himself near elderly Dorothy Walsh, massive frame casting her in shadow as she fumbled with her walker. The old woman's hands shook trying to navigate around him, dropping carefully selected tomatoes when he shifted to block her path. "Careful there, Grandma," he rumbled, making no move to help. "Wouldn't want you hurting yourself." At Martha Brennan's pie stand, Psycho Pete fingered golden crusts with unwashed hands while making comments bringing flush to her cheeks. "These look real tasty," he said, nervous tics causing his left eye to twitch rapidly. "Bet a woman with hands like yours has all kinds of talents." Martha stepped back instinctively, clutching her apron as customers drifted away. The criminals demanded samples from various vendors, free food, discounted crafts, intimidating stares when refused. Their tactics revealed professional experience, never quite crossing lines into obvious criminality, but making intentions unmistakably clear through body language, positioning, carefully chosen words. They spoke loudly about protection and how accidents happen in small towns without proper security arrangements. Vendors and customers responded with barely controlled fear. Some began packing early despite losing sales, others huddled together. For psychological protection, parents ushered children toward cars with forced casualness, fooling no one. Normal chatter and laughter died under menace's weight, replaced by nervous whispers and anxious glances. From across the street, young Deputy Rick Hansen observed with obvious uncertainty. His hand rested on radio but made no move to intervene. Whether through inexperience, fear, or explicit instructions avoiding confrontation, law enforcement presence that should protect the community remained passive and ineffective. Jackie cataloged everything with trained eyes that had spent decades studying movement, positioning, conflict dynamics. His notebook now contained tactical observations rather than cultural notes, escape routes, potential weapons, civilian positions, gang coordination patterns. He recognized predatory behavior and began calculating angles, timing, improvised defensive options using market environment. Escalation reached its tipping point when Blade approached Martha's stand with deliberate menace. He picked up one of her apple pies without permission, taking a large bite while maintaining intimidating eye contact. Apple filling dripped down his scarred chin as he chewed slowly, savoring both food and her obvious fear. "This is good," he said with calculated threat, "but it could use some insurance." Frank Kowalski set down the tomato he'd been arranging and began walking toward Martha Brennan's stand with measured steps that carried 72 years of accumulated authority. Despite arthritis in his joints and the weight of years, his military bearing emerged like steel beneath worn cloth, shoulders square, spine straight, every movement purposeful and precise. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable to anyone who understood the language of warriors. This wasn't an elderly man shuffling toward trouble. This was a decorated sergeant approaching a tactical situation with full awareness of risks and complete commitment to his course of action. The faded baseball cap marking him as a Vietnam veteran might as well have been dress uniform for all the authority it conveyed. "Ma'am, is there a problem here?" Frank's question was directed at Martha, but his eyes never left Blade's face. His voice carried quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, tempered by respect due to a lady in distress. The contrast between courteous words and unwavering gaze sent clear messages about his intentions. Blade released Martha's wrist and turned to face this new challenge, scarred features twisting into a sneer as he sized up the elderly veteran. Here was exactly the kind of interference he'd been hoping for. Perfect opportunity to make the kind of example that would terrorize the entire community into immediate compliance. An old man playing hero would serve as ideal demonstration of what happened to those opposing the Iron Wolves. "Walk away, old man," Blade said, voice carrying casual menace of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "This doesn't concern you unless you want to make it your problem too." Frank's response came without hesitation, words calm, but carrying weight of absolute conviction. Any decent person would be concerned when they see a lady being mistreated. He stepped closer, positioning himself between Blade and Martha despite being outnumbered 12-1 by men 40 years younger and considerably more armed. The confrontation crystallized everything separating criminal predators from civilized society. Blade represented jungle law, where might made right and strong preyed on weak without consequence. Frank embodied the principle that some things were worth fighting for regardless of odds, that protecting innocence was more important than personal safety. Jackie observed the developing situation from 20 feet away, tactical mind automatically calculating distances, angles, timing while his moral compass aligned with the veteran's courage. He noticed Frank's military positioning, angled to protect Martha while maintaining visual contact with other gang members, weight distributed for immediate action despite his age. The moment hung suspended like held breath as two different philosophies prepared to collide. Blade's first shove sent Frank staggering backward into his own vegetable stand. Tomatoes exploded against pavement in red splashes that looked ominously like blood spatter. Frank's small American flag toppled from its holder and fell into a puddle formed by crushed produce, the fabric darkening as it absorbed dirty water. Mixed with earth from his carefully tended vegetables, the humiliation was methodical and calculated. Blade forced Frank to his knees in front of the gathered crowd, making him pick up every scattered tomato while the gang provided mocking commentary. "Maybe next time you'll think before getting involved in things that don't concern you," Blade taunted, his voice carrying across the silent market square. Frank's hands shook, not from fear, but from rage and shame at being powerless to protect Martha or himself. "Look at the war hero now," Bobby Crane called out, his gold teeth glinting in the morning sun, crawling around in the dirt like he belongs there. The other bikers laughed, their voices harsh against the market's usual gentle sounds. Vendors and customers watched in horrified silence as a decorated veteran was degraded in public view. The scene was designed to break more than just Frank's spirit. It was meant to demonstrate to the entire community that their values of honor, service, and protecting others were meaningless against raw criminal power. Blade kicked dirt onto Frank's flag, an act of calculated desecration hitting the veteran harder than any physical blow could have managed. Community members turned away, unable to watch but unwilling to intervene. Martha wept openly behind her pie table. Pete Morrison clenched his fists but stayed back, and even Deputy Hanson across the street seemed frozen by the brazen nature of the assault. The message was clear: traditional American values offered no protection against organized criminal violence. That Jackie's hands tightened around his notebook as he watched injustice unfold. His entire career and philosophy centered on protecting the innocent and standing up to bullies, but his cover as tourist researcher argued for non-involvement. He watched Frank struggle to maintain dignity while being systematically humiliated, and felt his resolve crystallizing into action that as Frank painfully retrieved the last scattered tomato. Blade planted his boot on the fallen American flag, grinding it into dirty pavement while staring directly at the kneeling veteran. "This is what happens when old men try to be heroes," he announced to the crowd. Frank's eyes filled with tears of rage as he watched his flag, symbol of everything he'd fought for, being desecrated before his neighbors. The breaking point had arrived. Frank struggled to rise, knees shaking from physical strain and emotional devastation. The market square, moments before filled with community warmth, now felt like a crime scene where decency had been murdered in broad daylight. Jackie Chan stepped through the circle of bikers with serene confidence of a man walking through his own garden. In his hands, he held Frank's American flag, cleaned of dirt and folded with precise military honors into a perfect triangle. His movement was unhurried despite menace surrounding him, and his accented voice carried quiet authority that cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "Excuse me, but I think you dropped something," Jackie said, approaching Blade with the calm demeanor that had unnerved movie villains for 50 years. "This belongs to someone who earned the right to fly it." He presented the flag with a slight bow that spoke to his respect for military service and everything the symbol represented. Blade turned to face this new challenge, sizing up the middle-aged Asian man who barely reached his shoulders. Jackie's appearance suggested zero threat, no visible muscles, no intimidating posture, dressed like a tourist with his small notebook still tucked in his pocket. Blade saw an opportunity for a quick, brutal lesson that would cement his control over the terrified community. The contrast was deliberate and stark. Blade represented raw aggression and criminal power, while Jackie embodied quiet strength and moral authority. Frank watched from his knees as this stranger risked himself to return a symbol that meant everything to the old soldier. The crowd held its collective breath, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. "Thanks for the trash, tourist," Blade said mockingly, accepting the flag only to deliberately drop it back onto the ground. "Now keep walking before you get hurt." His voice carried the casual menace of someone who'd broken better men than this unassuming stranger appeared to be. That Jackie's expression didn't change, but those familiar with martial arts philosophy would recognize the moment when external calm masked internal preparation for action. His eyes glanced around the circle of bikers with apparent nervousness, cataloging positions, weapons, and tactical advantages with split-second precision that would have impressed military strategists. "I'm sorry," Jackie said, his voice carrying a subtle shift, still polite, still accented, but now containing unmistakable steel beneath the courtesy. "But I cannot let you dishonor that flag or this man." The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down before kings, carrying weight that even criminals recognized as dangerous. Blade's fist flew forward in what should have been an easy knockout of the meddling stranger. But as his knuckles cut through empty air, 12 hardened criminals were about to discover they'd just attacked one of the most dangerous men on Earth. The quiet tourist was gone, replaced by a legend who'd spent decades perfecting the art of making the impossible look effortless. Blade's punch met empty air as Jackie flowed around the attack like water around stone. The biker's forward momentum carried him off balance, and Jackie's gentle redirection sent him stumbling into Bobby Crane. Both men crashed to the ground in a tangle of leather and confusion, while Jackie stood exactly where he'd started, apparently having barely moved at all. What followed was 30 seconds of martial arts poetry that left 12 hardened criminals unconscious or groaning on the pavement. Jackie's movements blended his characteristic style, environmental improvisation, precise strikes, acrobatic agility, and absolute refusal to cause permanent harm. He used a market umbrella as a staff, tomato crates as stepping stones, and Martha's pie table as a launching point for a spinning kick that dropped 3 bikers simultaneously. Hammer Williams charged like an enraged bull and got redirected into a wooden support beam with surgical precision. Psycho Pete swung a chain that Jackie caught, spun, and used to trip 2 other attackers while simultaneously disarming a 4th. Bobby Crane drew a knife only to have it taken away and used to cut his own belt, dropping his pants and leaving him stumbling helplessly through the scattered vegetables. The combat choreography showcased Jackie's philosophy and legendary skill. Each takedown was decisive but not vicious. Every strike calculated to disable without causing lasting damage. The violence was necessary but restrained, performed with the efficiency of a master who understood that true strength lay in control, rather than destruction. The market crowd transformed from terrified witnesses to amazed spectators as they realized they were watching one of the world's most famous action stars in real combat. Cell phones emerged as people recognized the fluid movements and trademark style that had made Jackie Chan a household name across the globe. "That's Jackie Chan," someone whispered, and the name rippled through the crowd like wildfire spreading through dry grass. The impossible had become reality. Their peaceful farmers' market had become the stage for a legend to demonstrate why bullies should fear consequences. The last biker fell. Jackie immediately turned to help Frank to his feet. The veteran accepted assistance gratefully, and Jackie retrieved the American flag once more, presenting it properly with a slight bow that spoke to his respect for military service and the values it represented. Blade regained consciousness too. Find himself zip-tied with plastic strips Jackie had somehow produced from his tourist supplies. His gang lay scattered around the market square like broken toys, their intimidating image shattered along with their bones. Deputy Hanson finally approached, but cautiously. Even he recognized the situation was completely beyond his training. Jackie deflected the crowd's amazed questions with characteristic humility. "I just helped clean up some garbage that was bothering this nice community." But as he spoke, his eyes scanned the horizon toward the highway, expression growing serious. This had been too easy, too small scale. The real threat was still coming. The farmers' market buzzed with electric excitement as word spread that Jackie Chan had just dismantled an entire biker gang. Jenny Walsh, visiting her grandmother Dorothy, frantically filmed the aftermath while speed dialing her news station in Des Moines. Jackie helped vendors clean up scattered merchandise, still deflecting praise while quietly examining the bikers' equipment and tattoos for intelligence that might prove crucial. Frank insisted on formally thanking Jackie, introducing himself as Sergeant First Class Frank Kowalski, 1st Special Forces Group, retired. Jackie recognized the mutual respect between warriors and accepted the gratitude graciously, understanding that some bonds transcended cultural differences. Martha brought them both coffee and her famous apple pie, her hands still trembling but her spirit revived by seeing justice served with such spectacular efficiency. The community gathered around their unlikely heroes, feeling genuinely safe for the first time in months. Children who had hidden behind their parents now approached Jackie with wide-eyed wonder, asking for autographs and marveling at his gentle demeanor. Elderly vendors shared stories of previous intimidation attempts, revealing that today's confrontation was merely the latest in a pattern of escalating criminal pressure. Jenny's footage exploded across social media within hours. Jackie Chan defends veteran at farmer's market, trending nationally as news outlets picked up the incredible story. Jackie's phone buzzed constantly with calls from his agent, studio executives, and concerned friends. He realized his quiet research trip had become a very public incident with far-reaching consequences he hadn't anticipated. While the crowd celebrated, Jackie examined the bikers' possessions with Frank's military expertise providing context. They discovered burner phones with numbers from 3 different area codes, indicating a larger organization. The motorcycles were expensive and well-maintained, suggesting serious funding behind the operation. Most telling were the Iron Wolves MC patches, professionally made club colors speaking to organized criminal enterprise rather than random troublemakers. Sheriff Dale Kruger arrived with backup, but his response seemed perfunctory and reluctant. He processed the arrested bikers quickly, avoiding eye contact with Jackie and Frank while cutting off Deputy Hanson's attempts to discuss previous incidents. Jackie and Frank exchanged meaningful looks. Something wasn't right with local law enforcement. Despite underlying concerns, the market ended triumphantly. Vendors packed up together, customers lingered to chat with Jackie, and the community felt united by their shared experience. Frank invited Jackie for dinner, Sensing they needed to understand each other better if they were going to protect this place from whatever came next, as sunset painted Millbrook's peaceful streets golden. Both men knew their victory was just the beginning. To Frank's living room, surrounded by military memorabilia and family photographs, became an impromptu intelligence center as the two men spread a detailed map of the Tri-County area across his coffee table. Red pins marked locations where similar incidents had been reported. Small towns terrorized, businesses extorted, local authorities either corrupt or intimidated into complete inaction. The pattern was clear and deeply disturbing. Jackie's research skills combined with Frank's military intelligence background revealed the scope of the Iron Wolves operation. Using Jenny Walsh's media connections and internet resources, they discovered that Vincent "Viper" Castellano led a regional crime syndicate specializing in rural extortion targeting communities that couldn't afford proper police protection. It's psychological warfare applied to criminal enterprise, Frank explained, his tactical mind analyzing the enemy's strategy. Hit small communities where everyone knows everyone. Make brutal examples of anyone who resists and terrify the population into compliance. It's been working perfectly until we accidentally disrupted their newest expansion. Jackie called his agent in Los Angeles to explain why he couldn't return immediately. His film project would have to wait. These people had helped him understand authentic American community values, and now that community needed his help more than Hollywood needed another movie. Frank protested that he'd already done enough, but Jackie's moral code wouldn't allow abandoning people who'd welcomed him as family. They identified three key vulnerabilities in the Iron Wolves operation: their drug distribution network providing real money, their intimidation tactics relying on facing defenseless victims, and their corruption of local law enforcement providing protection from consequences. Attack all three simultaneously, and the entire organization could collapse like a house built on quicksand. Frank revealed he wasn't just any veteran. His special forces background included unconventional warfare, intelligence gathering, and coordinating with local assets. Despite his age, his tactical mind remained razor-sharp. Jackie brought his unique skill set, international connections, and most importantly, the element of surprise that criminals don't expect in rural America. Their strategic assessment was interrupted by Frank's phone ringing. Sheriff Kruger's voice was tense with barely controlled fear. "Frank, we need to talk. That Chinese friend of yours might have stirred up more trouble than you realize. Vincent Castellano is asking questions, and that's not good for anybody in this town." The call ended abruptly, leaving both men understanding their next move needed to happen fast. Jackie and Frank shook hands in agreement. They'd take the fight to the Iron Wolves before the criminals could regroup and retaliate. As they finalized plans, Jackie's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You made a mistake today, movie star. We know where you are, and we know who helped you. Back off now, or watch your new friends suffer." The message included a photo of the farmer's market with red circles around Frank, Martha, and other vendors. War had officially begun. Frank's kitchen transformed into a command center at dawn as Jackie brewed coffee with the precision of someone who understood that clarity of thought could mean the difference between victory and catastrophe. Frank spread detailed maps of the county's back roads across his kitchen table, his movements carrying the methodical preparation of a career soldier who'd learned that proper planning prevented poor performance. Both men had slept little, knowing that Viper Castellano's threat wasn't idle posturing. Frank's military discipline showed in his systematic approach, while Jackie's years of stunt coordination revealed themselves in his ability to visualize complex action sequences and identify potential problems before they became deadly realities. Their planning was interrupted by a determined knock at the door. Martha Brennan stood outside with a basket of fresh muffins and an expression of steely resolve that would have impressed drill sergeants. "I know you're planning something to stop those animals," she said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd raised 3 children and buried one husband. "I want to help." Her presence opened floodgates that neither man had anticipated. Within an hour, Frank's living room filled with volunteers from the farming community, each bringing unique skills and local knowledge that money couldn't buy. Pete Morrison contributed detailed understanding of every back road and abandoned building in 3 counties. Roy Patterson offered intelligence about the gang's motorcycles and their maintenance schedules, gleaned from his network of mechanics. Throughout the region, Louise Kelly volunteered her diner as a communications hub and safe house, while teenagers like Amy Stewart and her boyfriend Tommy Chin offered help with surveillance and communications using technology that impressed even Jackie. The generational bridge created unexpected strength, teenage tech savviness combined with adult experience and wisdom. The most moving moment came when Carl Hoffman, 75 and moving slowly but with unmistakable dignity, arrived in his old army dress uniform carrying a footlocker that hadn't been opened in decades. Inside were maps, radio equipment, and tactical gear from his own military service spanning 2 wars. "Haven't used this stuff since '72, he said quietly. "But I remember how it works." 3 generations of Americans, from World War II veterans to Vietnam survivors to modern teenagers, united around the common cause of protecting their community from criminal parasites who threatened everything they'd built together. Cultural differences dissolved in the face of shared values and mutual respect. Jackie shared stories of Hong Kong cinema's portrayal of heroic communities standing up to criminals, while the Americans told him about frontier justice and small-town values that built the nation. Despite different backgrounds, they found common ground in the universal human need to protect innocence and stand up to bullies who preyed on the vulnerable. As volunteers dispersed to their assignments, Frank pulled Jackie aside with a serious expression that carried the weight of command responsibility. Louise Kelly's diner transformed into mission control as the resistance network activated with efficiency that would have impressed professional intelligence agencies. At 6 a.m., the breakfast crowd provided perfect cover for the real business at hand. Jackie sat at the counter appearing to read a newspaper while actually coordinating multiple surveillance teams through encrypted text messages that Amy Stewart had helped establish. Frank occupied a corner booth with Carl Hoffman, their coffee cups covering tactical maps, while they discussed approach routes and contingency plans with the quiet authority of men who'd planned military operations under fire. The intelligence picture became clearer as reports flowed in from volunteer observers throughout the Tri-County area, revealing a criminal network more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. Amy Stewart and her classmates used social media platforms to track Iron Wolves members, cross-referencing posts and locations with impressive analytical skills. Roy Patterson's mechanic network provided updates on motorcycle movements and maintenance schedules, while farmers offered surveillance from their fields using equipment designed for monitoring livestock that worked equally well for tracking criminals. The pattern revealed 3 main operational bases: a meth lab disguised as a legitimate chicken farm, a money laundering operation running through a seemingly respectable trucking company, and Viper Castellano's headquarters at an abandoned mining facility that provided both isolation and defensive advantages. Each location represented a different aspect of the criminal enterprise. What had started as a few volunteers became a genuine grassroots movement as word spread quietly through the farming community. Retired teachers coordinated communications, business owners provided financial intelligence, and even the local pastor offered his church basement as an emergency shelter for families who might need protection during the coming confrontation. Jackie applied his film industry logistics experience to organize the operation like a complex movie production, creating detailed timelines, backup plans, and safety protocols that accounted for civilian protection. Frank contributed military-style operational security, teaching everyone compartmentalized information sharing and basic counter-surveillance techniques that kept their activities hidden from criminal observation. The network's value proved itself when Roy Patterson reported unusual activity at the chicken farm lab. Jackie and Frank conducted careful reconnaissance, confirming it as a major drug production facility hidden beneath legitimate agricultural operations. They photographed license plates, documented security measures, and identified shift changes, gathering intelligence that would take law enforcement months to develop through official channels. Through careful questioning and observation, they confirmed that Sheriff Kruger was compromised through a combination of bribery and intimidation, while Deputy Hansen appeared honest but dangerously naive. The state police were too understaffed to effectively patrol rural areas, making the Iron Wolves' choice of territory strategically perfect for criminal operations. As the diner emptied of breakfast customers, Louise refilled Jackie's coffee cup and whispered words that carried the weight of American military tradition. My late husband fought in Korea. He always said the hardest part wasn't the fighting. It was deciding to fight in the first place. Outside, Frank started his truck, and both men knew their reconnaissance phase was ending. In the basement of Pete Morrison's woodworking shop, surrounded by the scents of sawdust and wood stain, the core team finalized their assault plan on the chicken farm meth lab. Frank had converted Pete's workbench into a tactical planning table, complete with detailed sketches of the facility layout, guard rotations, and multiple escape routes. Jackie studied the plans with the same intensity. He brought to choreographing complex stunt sequences. The chicken farm operation proved more sophisticated than expected. Roy Patterson's reconnaissance revealed security cameras positioned at strategic points, guard dogs patrolling the perimeter, and at least 6 armed men on rotating shifts throughout the day and night. The meth lab itself was housed in modified chicken coops, with actual drug production hidden beneath legitimate-looking poultry operations that had fooled authorities for months. Frank's military experience identified weaknesses in the facility's security that criminal thinking had overlooked. The guards were thugs, not soldiers. They lacked proper tactical discipline and relied too heavily on intimidation rather than actual defensive strategy. Jackie contributed insights from his stunt work, pointing out how the farm's layout could be used for rapid movement and creative approaches that conventional thinking wouldn't consider. Carl Hoffman raised the crucial question that highlighted the team's fundamental decency. What happens to the chickens? Even while planning to destroy a criminal operation, they worried about innocent animals caught in the crossfire. Jackie suggested evacuating the livestock first, turning a potential obstacle into an advantage by using the chaos of loose chickens as distraction for their assault. Pete Morrison's workshop provided perfect cover for preparing specialized equipment. Under Jackie's guidance, they modified common farm tools into non-lethal weapons and created improvised climbing gear from rope and hardware. Frank contributed knowledge of military-style breaching techniques adapted for civilian use, ensuring every item had legitimate explanation if questioned by authorities. Amy Stewart established encrypted radio communications using modified hunting radios, while Tommy Chin programmed tracking apps allowing real-time coordination during the operation. Louise Kelly confirmed the diner as base communications, with Martha Brennan serving as backup coordinator from her farmhouse strategically positioned between the target and town. The attack was scheduled for 2 a.m. Tuesday, late enough that civilians would be asleep, early enough that guards would be tired and inattentive. Frank's analysis of patrol patterns revealed a 15-minute window when only 2 men covered the entire facility. As the planning session concluded, Frank clasped Jackie's shoulder with the respect of one warrior acknowledging another. In all my years of military service, I never worked with anyone quite like you. Jackie smiled and responded, in all my years of making movies, I never had stakes quite this real. At 1:45 a.m., Jackie and Frank approached the chicken farm through cornfields that provided perfect concealment, their movements invisible against the darkened landscape. Both men wore dark clothing and carried modified equipment, Jackie with his improvised climbing gear and non-lethal weapons, Frank with military-style observation equipment and communications gear that connected them to their support network. The storm front Jackie had predicted provided ideal cover, with light rain, muffling sound and cloud cover eliminating moonlight that might have revealed their approach. Jackie used his parkour skills to reach the main lab building, moving across rooftops and through shadows while Frank provided overwatch from a concealed position in the tree line, coordinating with their volunteer network through whispered radio communications. The first guard never saw Jackie coming. A precise pressure point strike rendered him unconscious for hours without permanent damage, demonstrating the martial arts master's commitment to minimum necessary force even against criminals who showed no such restraint. Jackie zip-tied the guard and continued his systematic approach to the facility's security. When Jackie encountered the guard dogs, he demonstrated why animal control experts consulted with him on film sets. Using treats prepared by Martha Brennan and calm, confident movements that spoke to years of working with animals during movie productions, he befriended rather than fought the dogs. The animals became allies, following him quietly through the facility and even alerting him to the second guard's location with soft whines. Pete Morrison's livestock knowledge proved invaluable as Jackie carefully opened chicken coop doors, allowing hundreds of birds to roam freely through the facility. The resulting chaos provided perfect distraction while ensuring the animals' safety from the coming destruction. Guards stumbled through squawking, flapping confusion while Jackie moved like a ghost through the mayhem they couldn't understand. Frank's military demolitions knowledge, combined with Roy Patterson's understanding of industrial equipment, allowed them to disable the meth production equipment without creating dangerous chemical reactions that could harm nearby farms. They systematically destroyed lab equipment, contaminated chemical supplies with harmless but ruinous additives, and documented everything for potential law enforcement evidence. The remaining 4 guards were taken down using Jackie's signature style, environmental weapons, precise strikes, and creative use of the facility's layout that turned their own workplace against them. One guard got tangled in chicken wire after Jackie used a hay bale as a springboard for an aerial takedown. Another slipped on strategically placed eggs, and the third found himself zip-tied to farm equipment, while Jackie handled security with spectacular efficiency. Frank photographed documents, copied computer files, and collected evidence of the operation's scope. They discovered shipping records linking the lab to distributors in 5 states, financial records showing monthly profits exceeding $200,000, and communications revealing Viper Castellano's money collection routes. The entire operation took 37 minutes from insertion to extraction, leaving behind a destroyed lab, secured guards, and enough evidence to convict dozens of criminals. That 48 hours after the lab destruction sent shockwaves through the Iron Wolves organization, their weekly money collection day arrived with mechanical precision. Using intelligence gathered from the chicken farm raid, Jackie and Frank had identified the route Viper's collectors used to gather extortion payments from terrorized businesses across Clayton County's rural communities. Frank studied the collection schedule from the passenger seat of Roy Patterson's modified pickup truck, noting how the criminals had turned extortion into a science. Jackie posed as a delivery driver in borrowed coveralls, his truck loaded with legitimate packages that provided perfect cover for surveillance operations while allowing him to observe each collection point without arousing suspicion. The money collection operation revealed the true scope of criminal exploitation that had been bleeding these communities dry. Every small business along a 30-mile route paid weekly insurance fees ranging from $500 to $2,000, depending on their perceived ability to pay. The collectors, Bobby Crane and 3 other bikers recently released on bail, followed a precise schedule, hitting 12 businesses between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. every Thursday. Each stop represented a family's dreams being strangled by criminal greed that recognized no limits or human decency. Jackie witnessed the human cost firsthand as he observed the collections. A family restaurant owner handing over grocery money with shaking hands, an elderly hardware store proprietor emptying his till with tears streaming down his weathered face, and a young mother running a flower shop sacrificing her children's college fund to avoid mysterious accidents. Louise Kelly provided real-time updates from her diner, while Amy Stewart tracked the bikers' movements through social media posts and cell phone signals that revealed their location with surprising accuracy. The precision of their intelligence gathering rivaled professional law enforcement operations, proving that motivated citizens could accomplish remarkable things when properly organized. Frank selected the perfect ambush point, a rural intersection where Bobby Crane's collection team had to stop for what appeared to be a legitimate police checkpoint. Instead of corrupt Sheriff Kruger, they encountered Jackie disguised as a state trooper using costume pieces courtesy of Amy's Drama Club, while Frank provided radio support from a concealed position that allowed oversight of the entire operation. The confrontation showcased Jackie's ability to adapt his fighting style to different scenarios and constraints. Wearing a police uniform restricted his movement, forcing him to rely more on defensive techniques and precise strikes rather than his usual acrobatic approach. When Bobby drew a gun with obvious intent to use it, Jackie disarmed him using the police car's open door as a shield, then restrained all 4 bikers using zip ties and handcuffs borrowed from Deputy Hanson's patrol car. The bikers' saddlebags contained $30,000 in cash, the week's extortion payments from 12 terrified business families. Frank photographed every bill and document before they began the most satisfying part of the operation, returning the money to its rightful owners and watching hope return to faces that had forgotten what freedom looked like as the sun set over. The valley where 12 families would sleep peacefully for the first time in months. Jackie and Frank sat in Roy's truck, counting the remaining evidence, financial records, communication devices, and documented proof of the extortion network that would destroy dozens of criminal careers. Word had spread quickly through the business community that someone was fighting back against the Iron Wolves, and store owners who had seemed broken and defeated suddenly stood straighter and spoke louder. The psychological victory proved as important as the financial blow to the criminal organization. Businesses that had been paying protection money for months began coordinating their own mutual protection efforts, sharing information and supporting each other in ways that made future extortion attempts nearly impossible. The community was rediscovering its own strength. Frank's assessment was cautiously optimistic as he reviewed their intelligence haul. 2 down, 1 to go, he said quietly, referring to their systematic dismantling of the Iron Wolves' 3 primary operations. But Jackie's expression grew increasingly serious as his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Amy Stewart that would change everything they thought they knew about their enemy's capabilities. Massive convoy heading toward Millbrook. The message read with the precision of someone who understood that lives depended on accurate intelligence. At least 30 bikes. ETA 2 hours. This isn't a collection run. They're loaded for war. The retaliation they had been expecting was finally coming. But the scope exceeded their worst-case planning scenarios. That Amy's follow-up messages painted an increasingly grim picture as her network of teenage spotters reported convoy composition and armament that suggested domestic terrorism rather than simple criminal retaliation. The bikers carried assault rifles, Molotov cocktails, and equipment that looked suspiciously like stolen military hardware. Viper Castellano himself was leading the convoy, his presence indicating that this was no longer about business. It was personal. The most devastating blow came when Sheriff Kruger's patrol car was spotted leading the convoy toward Millbrook, his emergency lights providing escort for the approaching criminals. The corruption they had suspected ran deeper than imagined, extending to active collaboration between law enforcement and organized crime that made their situation nearly hopeless. Frank's military training kicked in as he began calculating defensive options against impossible odds. 30-plus armed criminals against 2 men, regardless of skill level, represented tactical circumstances that conventional military doctrine would classify as unsurvivable. Even with community support, they faced enemies with superior numbers, better weapons, and the element of surprise. Jackie stared at his phone as more messages arrived, each one painting a darker picture of what was approaching their peaceful community. The quiet tourist who had come to research small-town America was about to face the greatest challenge of his legendary career, and for the first time in decades, he wasn't certain that good would triumph over evil. Viper's convoy entered Millbrook's city limits. Both men understood that their careful planning and methodical approach had been replaced by desperate improvisation against an enemy who recognized no rules except violence. The real war was about to begin. Viper Castellano's voice boomed through a megaphone as Iron Wolves members took strategic positions throughout Millbrook's downtown area, transforming the peaceful farming community into occupied territory. Armed bikers manned roadblocks at every intersection, while civilian families were herded into the town square like hostages awaiting their fate. Viper himself stood atop the gazebo where Jackie had first defended Frank, symbolically claiming dominance over the site of his organization's humiliation. The ultimatum was brutally clear. Jackie Chan and Frank Kowalski had 1 hour to surrender themselves for public execution, or the Iron Wolves would begin killing civilians, starting with the elderly and children. To demonstrate their seriousness, Viper ordered the burning of Pete Morrison's woodworking shop, the flames visible throughout the valley as a warning of escalating destruction to come. The terrorists had chosen their targets with calculated precision. Martha Brennan, Louise Kelly, Amy Stewart, and a dozen other community members who had helped the resistance were held at gunpoint in the town square. their families watching helplessly as armed criminals used innocent people as human shields. Any rescue attempt could result in mass casualties that would haunt the community forever. The Viper's strategy extended beyond immediate intimidation to long-term psychological warfare. Even if Jackie and Frank surrendered, he planned to execute several community members as examples, ensuring that no other small town would ever consider resisting Iron Wolf's operations. The message would echo across rural America. Cooperation meant survival. Resistance meant death for entire communities. From their concealed position in Frank's house, Jackie and Frank analyzed an impossible tactical situation through windows that provided clear views of the occupied town square. 30-plus armed enemies controlled the high ground, possessed superior firepower, and used innocent civilians as shields against any conventional assault. Traditional military doctrine offered no solution against such overwhelming odds. Despite the terror, small acts of defiance emerged throughout the town that spoke to the American spirit that couldn't be broken by threats. Roy Patterson had sabotaged several of the bikers' motorcycles before the occupation began, disabling their primary escape vehicles. Carl Hoffman used his World War II experience to signal other veterans through subtle hand movements that coordination was still possible. Even captured civilians like Martha refused to show fear, maintaining dignity despite mortal danger that surrounded them. Their courage reminded everyone watching that some things were worth dying for, and that Americans had never surrendered their values to bullies, regardless of the odds they faced. With 15 minutes remaining until the deadline, Viper ordered his men to drag Amy Stewart to the center of the square and force her to her knees, a gun placed to her head, while cameras recorded everything for maximum psychological impact. In Frank's basement, surrounded by his military memorabilia and family photographs that told the story of a life spent serving others, the old soldier delivered a speech that would transform despair into determination. "I've been in impossible situations before," he told Jackie, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had faced death and found something stronger. "And I learned that when you can't win through strength, you win through what you're fighting for." His words crystallized the difference between criminal power and community strength, reminding Jackie that they weren't facing this crisis as isolated individuals, but as defenders of values that had built the greatest nation on earth. Every person they'd met in Millbrook represented American principles worth defending. Martha's kindness, Pete's craftsmanship, Louise's hospitality, Amy's optimism, and the quiet dignity of people who worked hard and helped their neighbors. Frank's speech awakened something powerful in both men, the realization that their mission extended far beyond personal survival to preserving the way of life that made communities like Millbrook possible. The town hadn't just welcomed them. It had reminded them what was worth fighting for when everything seemed lost. Despite the mortal danger, the resistance network refused to abandon their leaders or surrender to terrorist demands. Roy Patterson emerged from hiding with tactical intelligence gathered at enormous personal risk. He'd identified weak points in the Iron Wolf's positioning and counted their ammunition supplies through careful observation. His information would prove crucial to any counterattack. Carl Hoffman arrived with 3 other elderly veterans, all carrying hunting rifles and wearing expressions of grim determination that spoke to battles fought and won decades earlier. "We didn't survive wars just to watch bullies destroy our home," he declared, his words carrying the weight of sacrifice that had preserved freedom for subsequent generations. The most powerful moment came when Amy's classmates, teenagers who could easily flee to safety through back roads they knew better than any adult, chose to stay and help coordinate the resistance. Tommy Chun had successfully hacked into the Iron Wolf's communications, providing real-time intelligence on their positions and plans that leveled the tactical playing field significantly. Jackie's film industry experience combined with the veterans' military knowledge to create unconventional solutions that might succeed where traditional tactics would fail. They couldn't match the Iron Wolf's firepower, but they possessed superior knowledge of local terrain, unshakable community support, and the element of surprise that comes from defending home ground. Frank coordinated defensive positions using every lesson learned in Southeast Asian jungles, while Jackie planned mobility routes that only someone with his parkour skills could execute successfully. The farming community revealed hidden resources, hunting rifles, farm equipment that could be weaponized, and knowledge of every hidden passage in the county. Louise Kelly's diner became a communications hub. Martha's farm provided sniper positions, and the high school gymnasium transformed into a coordination center for civilian evacuation that would minimize casualties while maximizing resistance effectiveness. At precisely 11:47 p.m., with 13 minutes remaining until Viper's deadline expired in blood and terror, Jackie Chan emerged from the shadows at the edge of the town square. He walked slowly toward the gazebo where Viper held court, his hands visible and empty, appearing to surrender as demanded while Frank and the volunteers moved into position using drainage ditches and back alleys that only lifelong residents knew existed. Jackie's surrender was actually the opening move in a carefully choreographed assault designed to draw enemy attention while positioning community defenders for maximum tactical advantage. As he approached the gazebo, Jackie subtly signaled Frank's sniper teams and coordinated timing with split-second precision learned from decades of complex stunt work where one mistake meant serious injury or death. What appeared to be Jackie's compliance suddenly transformed into spectacular chaos as he reached the gazebo steps. Using his legendary agility, he launched into a sequence that drew every Iron Wolf's attention and weapon toward the town center while creating the distraction his allies needed. Motorcycle gas tanks exploded courtesy of Roy Patterson's mechanical sabotage, floodlights shattered from precisely thrown stones, and the entire square erupted in confusion that masked coordinated counterattacks that Frank's military precision coordinated. Multiple simultaneous strikes across the town that demonstrated how proper planning could overcome superior numbers. Carl Hoffman and his veteran snipers eliminated roadblock guards with non-lethal but incapacitating shots that dropped criminals without killing them. Roy Patterson's team disabled the remaining motorcycles, while Louise Kelly led civilian evacuation. Efforts that removed hostages from danger within minutes. In the town square, Jackie demonstrated why he was considered the world's greatest action star by turning the entire environment into weapons and tools. He used park benches as springboards, flag poles as staffs, and even the gazebo's architecture as cover and concealment. Every movement served multiple purposes: attacking enemies, protecting civilians, and advancing tactical objectives that would have impressed military strategists. The most inspiring moments came when ordinary citizens transformed into warriors defending their home against terrorist occupation. Martha Brennan used her knowledge of the town's layout to guide families to safety through routes the criminals hadn't anticipated, while Pete Morrison emerged from hiding to rescue Amy Stewart with a perfectly timed tackle that demonstrated courage transcending age. Even elderly Dorothy Walsh contributed by throwing her purse at a fleeing biker with accuracy that would have impressed baseball scouts. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, the defenders demonstrated that superior knowledge, preparation, and motivation could overcome raw firepower when Americans decided to stand up for their values. Frank's positioning allowed crossfire that pinned down multiple enemies simultaneously, while Jackie's mobility kept the Iron Wolves constantly off balance and unable to establish defensive positions or coordinate effective counterattacks against opponents who seemed to appear and disappear like ghosts in their own hometown. Within 23 minutes of the assault's beginning, most Iron Wolves members were either unconscious, zip-tied, or fleeing into the night on foot, leaving only their leader cornered and desperate. Viper Castellano stood alone atop the gazebo where this conflict had begun, his criminal empire collapsing in ruins around him as his supposedly loyal followers fled into the darkness or lay zip-tied and groaning in the town square. Below him, Jackie Chan approached with the fluid confidence of a master martial artist who had spent decades perfecting his craft, while Frank Kowalski coordinated the final phases of securing their community from terrorist occupation. The contrast was stark and symbolic. Viper's desperate rage against Jackie's calm determination, criminal fury driven by wounded pride against righteous justice motivated by protection of innocence. Everything that separated civilization from barbarism was about to be decided in single combat between two men representing completely different philosophies of life. The final confrontation showcased everything that made Jackie legendary while respecting the gravity of real combat, where lives hung in the balance. Viper fought with the vicious desperation of a cornered animal, using a knife, chains, and even pieces of broken gazebo as weapons. Jackie responded with his characteristic style, precise, creative, and absolutely committed to stopping the threat without becoming the monster he fought against. The gazebo became a three-dimensional battlefield as Jackie used its architecture for spectacular combat that combined his martial arts mastery with environmental awareness. He swung from support beams, used decorative elements as weapons and shields, and turned Viper's own aggression against him with techniques that redirected violent energy rather than meeting it head-on. Even in mortal combat, Jackie maintained his core principle of using minimum necessary force, choosing to disable and subdue rather than destroy, even when facing someone who showed no such restraint. This wasn't weakness. It was the supreme confidence of a master who knew he didn't need to kill to win, combined with moral strength to remain human against inhuman opposition. As the fight progressed, Viper's true cowardice emerged like rot beneath polished leather. He attempted to use Amy Stewart as a human shield when she broke free during the chaos, threatened to burn down the entire town rather than accept defeat, and finally pulled a concealed gun in violation of his own challenge to single combat. Each escalation revealed him as exactly what he was: a bully who could only function when he possessed unfair advantages over helpless victims. Frank provided tactical overwatch, ensuring no remaining Iron Wolves members could interfere with the final confrontation, while other community members secured the perimeter and documented everything for future legal proceedings. The battle wasn't truly solo. Jackie fought alone, but he fought for an entire community that had his back and would never forget his sacrifice. Viper's last desperate move, firing his pistol at Jackie from point-blank range, became his ultimate downfall as Jackie's legendary reflexes and decades of choreographing impossible stunts allowed him to not only dodge the bullets, but use Viper's own momentum to send the terrorist leader tumbling from the gazebo into a pile of zip ties thoughtfully placed by Martha Brennan. Justice had been served with precision, courage, and the unshakable conviction that good must triumph over evil when ordinary people refuse to surrender their values to fear. Sunlight streamed through Louise Kelly's diner windows as the community gathered for what felt like both victory celebration and solemn remembrance. Jackie sat at the counter, torn clothes testament to the night's battle, while Frank occupied his corner booth with tactical maps replaced by medical supplies for treating minor injuries sustained during their desperate fight. State Police Captain Maria Rodriguez arrived with honest law enforcement officers who immediately began processing captured Iron Wolves members. Her investigation revealed Viper's criminal network spanning 7 states, millions in illegal profits, and corruption reaching into multiple sheriff's departments throughout the region. The evidence gathered by Jackie and Frank provided foundation for prosecutions that would destroy organized crime operations across rural America for years to come. 2 weeks later, Millbrook's courthouse hosted preliminary hearings for Vincent Viper Castellano and his Iron Wolves. Jackie sat in the front row wearing his best suit, while Frank appeared in rarely worn military dress uniform. The contrast between dignified proceedings and their chaotic confrontation illustrated civilization's triumph over barbarism. The Viper's prosecution showcased how comprehensive evidence gathering could dismantle criminal organizations. Intelligence collected by Jackie and Frank, combined with testimony from terrorized business owners, created an airtight case sending dozens of criminals to prison for decades. Sheriff Kruger's corruption trial revealed law enforcement betrayal, extending beyond bribery to active participation in terrorism against his own constituents, forcing examination of similar corruption throughout the region. 3 months later, Millbrook's farmers market reopened with a celebration drawing visitors from across the state. The same vendors occupied identical spots where conflict began, but everything had changed. Confidence replaced fear, pride overcame shame. Jackie and Frank cut the ceremonial ribbon together, symbolizing both continuity and transformation. The market had become more than weekly commerce. It represented American resilience, triumphing over criminal terrorism through ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things. 1 year later, Jackie returned for Millbrook's first annual Community Courage Festival. Frank received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in the town square, while Jackie's film Small Town Heroes inspired global community defense movements. As sunset painted the Iowa farmland golden, Jackie and Frank sat on the veterans' porch sharing beer and watching peaceful streets where children played safely. Heroes aren't special people, Jackie reflected. They're ordinary people doing what's right when it matters most. Frank raised his beer in salute. And courage doesn't expire, it just needs the right cause. In the distance, laughter carried on evening breeze like a promise that good triumphs when ordinary Americans refuse to surrender to fear. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.